All right, everyone, we did it. We reached 7,181 subscribers, and I don't think there's any better number to celebrate this milestone than to do this Q&A thing. Yeah, it's been a little while since I've uploaded. I'm sorry about that, but I'll get back to that eventually. If you missed the Q&A thing because YouTube doesn't really notify as many people as they should when I do these community posts, then you can comment some questions and I'll respond to them in the comments. I also put up a question thing on Instagram that I'll answer in here too, but I'll do the YouTube ones first. Awful Artist asks, what's your rate your music? It's 2 underscores. It's the number 2 and then 2 underscores and then the word underscores. I know it's such a clever and genius name that I came up with a long time ago, and I've kind of just been using it for most things on the internet since then. Ram asks, favorite metal album? Probably Sun's Black One. When it comes to metal, I kind of tend to prefer more atmospheric stuff. I think just with louder music in general, I kind of like it to be a bit more loud and ominous because I find it very relaxing and very meditative, but also very dark and kind of creates this really interesting atmosphere. And I think that Sun's Black One's a good example of that. There's like other black metal albums and stuff too, like Emperors in the Nightside Eclipse and stuff like that. But yeah, Sun's Black One's probably my favorite metal album, even if it is kind of more of like a dark ambient kind of album. Our buddy Backside Steez from Discord asked a whole bunch of questions, which is pretty awesome because they're all pretty good questions. What are some albums that I think are overhated? I think that Kesha's Animal doesn't really get the credit it deserves for being this kind of really celebratory celebration, but also kind of like a satirical slant at like scenecore shit. It kind of takes like the whole aesthetic of the whole thing, kind of puts it into the context of pop music, which I actually think works to its benefit and makes it a lot more enjoyable than most other music that you would kind of quantify as that. And even if you put that context aside, I still think it's a really great pop album that I think kind of defines a lot of music from the early decade and still actually holds up pretty well with a lot of the trends and shit that are going on now. And I think that people just don't really talk about that album that much. Although I think more people have kind of come around on it more nowadays. I also think that Speedin' Bullet to Heaven, the Kid Cudi album, really isn't that bad. Like, I know a lot of the more primitive guitar riffs and just kind of how repetitive it all is would be a bad thing, I think, in most rock albums, but I think that the way that Cudi frames it in context of just this very raw songwriting kind of gives it this like outsider slant that I think actually makes it a pretty interesting listen. It's certainly not flawless. It's definitely very bloated, and there's definitely some tracks that are better than others, but I think that in general, I think the album has a lot going for it that a lot of people are pretty quick to dismiss just because it is kind of different sounding from Cudi's other works or just, from other rock albums in general. It's a little more, it's enjoyable in a way that I think is kind of different than, most other rock albums that are a bit more technical or kind of go a bit more places in terms of its instrumentation. What are some records that sound unlike anything else out there? Man, I'm gonna butcher this pronunciation, but that Stockhausen piece, Gesang der Hurlinger, I think it's something like that is how you pronounce it. But I think that piece, even though it is still, it's like a really old piece. It's from like the 60s. But I think that piece still holds up as something that's very unique and very haunting, and I absolutely love it. Cave Rock by Cro-Magnon is another album that I think sounds pretty much unlike anything else. I'm not a big fan of that album. I don't really care for it that much, but it is unique sounding, and I won't deny that. Are there any albums out there that I would consider anti-music? That's another pretty interesting question. I mean, pretty much any like harsh noise thing I think you could call anti-music. But I don't know. I think there's a lot of music that doesn't really go by the conventions of music per se, but there is a lot of technicality to it and a lot of kind of planned chaos and everything behind it. So I think maybe just some like nature recordings or something. I don't know. I can't really think of like an example of that off the top of my head because I think that most albums that I've listened to that have like nature recordings in them kind of have other shit going on, whether that be that Masakatsu Takagi album or Chill Out by the KLF. And I wouldn't really consider either of those albums to be like anti-music. A lot of people talk about that Vaporwave album. I think it's called Liberated from the World by New Deluxe Life. I always forget the name of it because it's like all in Japanese whenever I listen to it on Bandcamp. But a lot of people kind of talk about that album as if it's like anti-music, but I actually think that album's a lot catchier and a lot more rhythmically well thought out and interesting than a lot of people give it credit for. So I don't know. I think that there's just a lot of ways to make music, and I don't know, I guess being anti-music is probably just the least amount of like input from the artist is possible. maybe like like a John Cage type of thing. Indeterminacy. Favorite TV shows? I don't watch that many TV shows, and usually when I do, I just watch like old Adult Swim shows. Like I recently just rewatched Moral Orel, and that still holds up as one of my favorite shows. The Boondocks, Aqua Teen, Hunger Force, Xavier, Renegade Angel, stuff like that. That's kind of just what I enjoy watching. Any hobbies outside of music? I love video games and movies as well, two of my other favorite art forms. And do I ever plan to talk about Elliott Smith? Yes, absolutely. Elliott Smith is, you guys may or may not know, is my favorite artist of all time. And I'd like to actually make a video kind of ranking all of his albums or something like that. Maybe I'll get to that in the near future, maybe after this current video that I'm working on. We'll have to see. But yeah, I definitely would like to talk about Elliott Smith at some point. XXXX asks, how did I get in contact with Fax Gang? I DM'd them on Twitter. It was that simple. I just DM'd them. Tost asks, have you considered making a video about Jewel Set? Not really. I mean, a lot of people talk about Jewel Set a lot, especially like in my comments and stuff. Everyone brings up Jewel Set, and I think Jewel Set are pretty cool. There's some mixtapes in the Jewel Set canon that I think are pretty enjoyable, like Broken by Zero Suit, or any number of DJ Slur or I Slur When I Talk mixtapes. I don't really have any plans to talk about them at the moment, but if I, end up going further down the rabbit hole and I feel inspired to, then perhaps. Hans Dado says, thank you, Bass God. Yes, indeed. Gustavo asks, do you play any instruments? If so, do you consider making music in the future? Yes, I do. I play acoustic guitar. I've been playing it for a few years, and I'd love to make a folk punk album at some point in the near future. That's something I want to do. I'd also love to just make noise music as well at some point, because that sounds fun to do. Maybe some plunderphonics, because that also seems just like kind of fun music to put together. But yeah, I'd like to do that at some point. Idiot Boy asks, what are some of your favorite music genres? Are there more specific genres you'd like to explore more that you haven't already? My favorite genres, I think like my top 3 genres would be like cloud rap, but really kind of more broadly just experimental hip hop in general. I absolutely love that, as you guys know. Although cloud rap, I guess, kind of narrows it down a bit more. Singer-songwriter, which is like, the most vague genre tag in the world, but still kind of encompasses a lot of my favorite music, and post-punk as well. Post-punk's absolutely brilliant. In genres that I'd like to explore more, definitely like classical music and country music are definitely the genres that I know the least, and so I'd like to delve into them a bit more, especially when it comes to like alt country and stuff like that, because there's a lot of really interesting country albums that I like, and I'd like to kind of learn more about alt country and stuff like that. Jackson Ostrowski, hope I'm pronouncing your name right, asks, best record of 2021 so far. Definitely for me, it's the new Hi Zoe album, or Delete Zeke, whatever they want to be called. The album Teen Week. It's kind of this combination of like hyperpop and like cloud rap, and like there's almost some kind of hex stuff going on in there, and maybe some glitchcore or whatever y'all are calling it. It's a very 2020, like early 2020s sounding album, which I don't know if that's gonna like end up dating it in the long run, but for the time being, I think it sounds really good. I think it's a really awesome, very well written album, kind of about teenage emotions and stuff like that. That kind of just encompasses a lot of things that are going on in the underground right now in a way that I think is a lot more interesting than a lot of other projects that I've heard that kind of dabble in those sounds. I also think that the new Frogman album, Slime Koro, is really good. It's a lot like Playboi Carti, especially in the vocals, but the production's a lot poppier, and I think that kind of plays off of the vocals in this way that's really interesting, and it makes for a pretty awesome, like, kind of cloud rappy kind of album. And, of course, the new Fax Gang album, Ethernet, and that EP they've dropped with Black Winter Wells, that was pretty awesome, too. Ryu09 asks, other favorite music nerd writers from YouTube, RYM, etc.? My favorite like music YouTubers are probably like Rick the Lie, makes great stuff, makes good reviews that are pretty well edited and also very funny. The Sound Binge, I like the way that she kind of talks about music in this very like abstract way that's very interesting to hear. Not Real Music makes pretty good stuff. Shout out to him. Punk Revolution Now, I know that guy's a little bit polarizing in the community. He's got a lot of haters, but I find him very entertaining and very enjoyable. It was also really cool to actually see Mike the Snare kind of blow up in the way that he did, because I was actually like subbed to that guy back when he only had like 100 subscribers or so, back when he was just doing like the 15-second reviews, which is pretty interesting. Big Papa Sub asks, favorite obscure rap album / song, and what are my favorite rap album covers? That's a good question. So I bring this album up a lot. I don't know if I've brought it up in a video, but I bring it up on like social media and stuff a lot. But Fear Itself by Casual is an album that I don't think that many people talk about. Casual was part of the Hieroglyphics crew with Del the Funky Homo Sapien and Souls of Mischief and stuff like that. And so it's this very cartoony kind of rap album from the 90s, and it almost sounds kind of like a Looney Tune or something, just put in the context of like a rap album. And while that might sound kind of corny, it's actually just very interesting. The beats just kind of are very bouncy, and the flows just bounce off of the beats as well in this way that's really intriguing. And it's one of my favorite albums of all time. My favorite rap album covers, Atrocity Exhibition has a really cool cover. King Astro Slick the Magnificent by Ruben Slick. Of course, Company Flows, Fun Crusher Plus has a pretty cool album cover. The Constructus Corporation, The Ziggurat, Dream World by Blackout is pretty cool too. Yeah, there's a lot of cool rap album covers out there. Liam Kenwood asks, where do you see music going in the 2020s? What trends and genres would you like to see gain more relevance in the future? I don't know. It's really interesting because it's kind of like people are making music now that kind of grew up with like the internet and stuff. And so we're kind of seeing a lot of the more meme aesthetics in things kind of like hyperpop or like, you know, glitchcore or digicore or whatever people are calling that. We're kind of seeing a lot of that because it's like Zoomers are making music now and they kind of always grew up with the internet, you know, or should I say we should, because, you know, I'm a Zoomer too. And it's really interesting to kind of hear that, and it's going to be really interesting to hear people who grew up listening to the stuff that, like, these people are making and, like, where it's going to go from there. I really don't know. It's unpredictable. It's really crazy where things are going. As far as, like, the more mainstream side of it, I don't really know. I feel like the whole, I feel like mainstream music in general is becoming less big of a thing because of the internet, and everyone can kind of just listen to what they want to listen to, but I don't know. We'll have to see. But that whole thing, that whole sound is pretty interesting to me. A name that I don't know how to pronounce, I'm sorry. Are you a big fan of another art form, film, painting, etc.? Also, favorite Swans album other than Soundtracks for the Blind? Love your channel, hope you're doing well. Thank you, I really appreciate that. Yeah, I really love like video games and film as well are two art forms that I do really love a lot. I'll put up some of my favorite games and movies and stuff on the screen. You know, you can follow my letterbox. It's the same as my Rate Your Music, and I have a Glitch Wave as well, but that website is kind of jank, kind of in its earlier stages, it seems. But yeah, I really love those art forms as well. I've actually thought about kind of making videos about movies, or at least about kind of like some of the really weird movies and stuff, kind of like going in more in depth about like specific directors and stuff like that. I'd like to do that at some point, maybe sometime this year, we'll see. And my favorite Swans album is probably White Light from the Mouth of Infinity, because a lot of the Swans like 90s stuff, they kind of just fell into this very like theatrical, huge kind of sound, which is really interesting to listen to. But I don't know, it gets a little played out for me, but I think that on White Light from the Mouth of Infinity, they kind of I feel like they kind of peaked, at least in that specific sound, with that album. I do like To Be Kind as well, but I don't know. In general, I'm not like the biggest Swans fan, at least, especially not like when compared to a lot of the other like music people, because everyone just loves Swans online. But no, I think that they have some great records, and that's definitely one of them. And that's it for YouTube questions. Going to move on to the Instagram ones now. Simon Jeffis asks, thoughts on Coinlocker Kid / Cest Lackey. It's like if Mr. Bungle was fronted by Hobo Johnson, which isn't a bad thing necessarily. It's pretty interesting stuff. It's a little overwhelming at times, but I think he's cool. I think he makes some interesting music. Some people might get mad at me that I just made that comparison, but nah, he makes some cool stuff. I'm not like obsessed with him or anything, but he's interesting. A Fewer Stream asked me my thoughts on In the Airplane Over the Sea. Yeah, I mean, it's a classic album. I think it's earned its place in pop culture. I think it's a combination of like lo-fi drumming and simple guitar riffs and kind of these blaring horn sections and Jeff Mangum's very high-pitched vocals with the abstract lyrics is definitely something that I could see why it resonates with a lot of people, and it resonates with me too. I think it is really interesting. There's like other albums from the Elephant Six Collective that I kind of tend to gravitate towards a little more, that I guess just kind of have a bit more going on musically, you know, whether that be the Olivia Tremor Control or some of Montreal's earlier albums, or the music tapes as well. The music tapes make some pretty interesting stuff. That's like an Elephant Six supergroup. But yeah, I think the album's earned its place in pop culture and as kind of this indie phenomenon that it is. Hip Hop Brackets. Hey, Chris, what's up, man? Asks, what is the best little beat tape? I think it's Evil Red Flame. So the video that I'm actually working on now is, about the God's Father mixtape and, kind of why I think it's such a great mixtape. And so that would be my answer. That is kind of like the typical, like, I guess, like, critics answer, like, critics pick for, like, best little B project. I'm putting critics in quotes, by the way. I'm doing air quotes with my hands, but you can't see it because it's just a microphone. But, yeah, Evil Red Flame is probably my second favorite, as well as 100% Gutta. That's definitely up there for me as well. I love the beat selections on there, and I love just his very eccentric kind of vocals and hooks on that tape as well. Quadrant Dub asks, do I like free improv? If so, why, and what's your favorite project? Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting free improv out there. I think that free improv kind of gives a lot of musicians just this very raw sound and just kind of is just raw emotions and just raw expression. And I think that free improv is really interesting because of that. There's a lot of like free jazz and stuff, especially that's interesting. You know, like Anthony Braxton's for alto or Peter Brotzman's Machine Gun, which are two of my favorite jazz albums. And you know, stuff with like rock as well, like Ground Zero's Play Standards. Ground Zero, I think, is just in general a really cool group that kind of uses like samples and like turntables and stuff, but also works in improvisation. And it's just a really interesting band. And Henry Cow as well. I've talked about Henry Cow before, but there's some really cool improv pieces on In Praise of Learning, which is one of my favorite albums of all time, and some of their other albums as well. Lemonade Diamonds asks, would you rather have harsh noise hit the top 10 Billboard or ambient lowercase type stuff? I got to go with the harsh noise. I would love to just walk into a Target and just hear a harsh noise song playing on the radio or just in the store. I'd love to get into a random Uber driver's car and they're listening to the radio and just hear some harsh noise on the radio. I think that would probably be more interesting than ambient lowercase, just hearing it, you know, playing in the car or whatever, just hearing it played everywhere. I would love just some harsh noise, you know, just at the party, everyone's just getting down to the harsh noise and they're just, you know, they're all moshing and everything. I think that would be quite interesting. Vicent Devitz, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, asks, any instruments that I know how to play. I did kind of answer this already, but yeah, acoustic guitar I can play decently well, at least. You know, I can play all the basic chords and stuff like that, which if you're making folk punk, that's really all you need to know. I'd love to kind of be able to play American Primitivism better than I can currently with like the finger picking and stuff, because finger picking is like kind of one of the most interesting things that you can do with an acoustic guitar, and I'd like to get better at that, definitely. Catholicism Sucks asks, if you only had 3 albums to listen to for the rest of your life, what would they be? That's a really interesting question. Sing to God by Cardiacs would definitely have to be in there because that's my favorite album of all time, and if I only had to listen to one album, then that is what I would pick. But as for the other 2, I mean, I'd have to pick something like really long, like a really long album, maybe like Free Music, the MySpace collection by Lil B, which, I mean, it might actually be cheating to put that on there because it is just kind of a compilation of a lot of stuff, but I'd still count it because there's like hundreds and hundreds of songs on there that, you know, I'd like to get around to at some point in my life. Maybe one day I'll hear all of them. And maybe like one of those Elliott Smith bootlegs, like that one Elliott Smith like bootleg of a lot of like kind of unreleased songs of his that's really long. Maybe that, just because it's like as much Elliott Smith as I can get, and he's my favorite artist. But that also might be cheating to put that on there because that is just kind of like a bootleg compilation. But you know, I don't know. Those are my answers. Rev7775 asks, which music collective are you paying the closest attention to at the moment? I don't know if you'd call them a collective or a label, but definitely Dismiss Yourself, which that might be kind of obvious because I talk about Dismiss Yourself all the time, but definitely them, as well as No Agreements as well. I kind of got into after I did the Fax Gang interview. Like Prisma Doll is pretty cool, Material Girl and stuff like that, and of course Fax Gang. I think they're making some pretty interesting stuff right now as well. Definitely check them out. Will Wave asks, what's your favorite obscure prog band? I think Arachnoid is a pretty cool band. They make like Zool type stuff. Pretty much any Zool band, really. I also like those bands with the members of Henry Cow that a lot of the other members have kind of delved into, like Aksak Mabul. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And Arch Bears as well. Stuff like that I think is pretty interesting stuff when it comes to, I guess, the more obscure side of progressive rock. Sam Pointer asks, Unknown Pleasures or Closer? Definitely Closer. I mean, I don't know which is like the better album per se, because Unknown Pleasures you could argue is a bit more distinct with the way that it has the riffs and everything like that. But with Closer, I just love how dense a lot of the rhythms are, and just the I guess the dancier kind of vibe of it, and how it kind of plays off of the emotions of the record. I think that makes it stand out a lot, especially as far as like 80s albums go. Just kind of makes it fit into the era, but also it has a really distinct sound. And I think that is maybe one of the reasons why it's like one of my favorite albums of all time. I definitely prefer it to Unknown Pleasures, even though Unknown Pleasures is probably stronger from like a riff perspective, and really even arguably just from a songwriting perspective in general. But Closer, I find it more interesting. I kind of gravitate towards it more. Miles Ramey01 asks, when did you get into the online music community? So I actually started the Instagram page, Album Reviews, writing like album reviews and stuff on Instagram, all the way back in March of 2016. And I kind of just did that for a bunch of years. I put up a lot of reviews and stuff, and I actually look back and I'm kind of like amazed at how consistently I posted reviews. Like, I don't know if I could even do that now, but yeah, really since March of 2016 probably. And I eventually kind of just jumped ship and went onto YouTube because I find it to be more fun and more interesting to do. Most of my oldest posts are archived because they're not very good at all. I don't know when the last post on my pages, but yeah, the first post that I ever made was actually about Life of Pablo, kind of around the time that came out. And I wouldn't really write much. I'd kind of just give a score and say like favorite and least favorite songs and do little pluses and minuses and stuff. But yeah, it is fun to look back at that time. It's very nostalgic. Bennett Goatsman, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong too. Who would you consider the greatest songwriter of all time? For me, it's Gil Scott-Heron. Gil Scott-Heron's a very good pick, actually. He's definitely top 10 for me at least. But the greatest songwriter, probably Tom Waits, is kind of my go-to answer, because I think that the way that Tom Waits just kind of creates these entire universes within all of his individual songs, and just with the kind of various instrumentation that he uses, and his voice as well is so distinct, but it's also very diverse despite it just being super deep. And I think that the way that he's able to do that and just kind of construct these entire worlds within all of his songs is just really intriguing. I don't think that other songwriters have really stepped up to that level, at least for me personally. And so that's probably why I consider Tom Waits to be the greatest. And Needletooth just wants to thank me for indirectly showing them the Brave Little Abacus. I'm appreciate it. I'm really glad that you enjoy the group's music. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, if you have any other questions, you can comment and I'll probably reply to the comment. Yeah, a new video should be coming out soonish. We'll see. Thank you all for sticking with me. I'll see you later.